Today, I'm joined by Garland Moore, a solutions architect at F5 who specializes in security and modern applications. Garland combines over 17 years of hands-on infrastructure experience with a growing focus on AI to build scalable, secure solutions. What sets Garland apart is his journey from the trenches. He spent years in infrastructure operations leading virtualization upgrades, storage migrations, and cybersecurity initiatives at organizations like Gulfport Energy and Sandridge Energy. That real-world experience across VMware, Cisco, Palo Alto firewalls, and Kubernetes gives him an end-to-end understanding that few architects possess. At F5, Garland earned recognition for mastering complex technologies faster than veteran practitioners. Today, he helps organizations across Oklahoma and Arkansas modernize and secure their application environments. When he's not solving infrastructure challenges, you'll find him volunteering with Feed the Children or coaching youth basketball. Garland, welcome to the show.
KJ, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
100%, man. I've been looking forward to this for a very, very long time. So happy to have you on here. And so with that, man, let's kind of jump right into that first question. So this is around like DNS security threats and defense, right? So when we look at the current attacks that are out there that you're seeing against DNS, what are some of the effective strategies that you've seen customers take or companies take to handle those DNS threats?
Yeah, so good question. I think we've seen earlier this year and even in the past, right, major providers have outages related to DNS, right? So not necessarily a system failure, but just name resolution type things, right? So being that DNS is the heartbeat of the internet. It's definitely something that is highly targeted and, something that people need to consider protecting. A few strategies I've seen, right? So DNSSEC is becoming more and more popular, right? Like a lot more enterprises are starting to adopt it. And even though it's been around for quite some time, right? You're starting to see more and more enterprises now adopt DNSSEC. Resolver hardening as well, right? So disabling things like open resolvers and even rate limiting on DNS. So you kind of think about rate limiting, you talk about like API protection, right? That's typically what you see when you talk about rate limiting, but even rate limiting DNS responses. And then monitoring, more visibility into what DNS servers are doing. Which kind of ties into the logging analytics, right? So you're starting to see more adoption in that space now something we should have been doing all along, but, as we're starting to see these DNS attacks amplified now, this is becoming more and more important. So, and then you got different providers and different technologies that are doing, intelligent DNS and managed DNS. So people actually now, more people trusting third-party providers to help them manage DNS and things like intelligent traffic management when it comes to like blocking malicious domains before connections are made and things like that. So we're starting to see a lot more intelligence built into DNS security.
No, I love that. And so when you think about AI and the explosion of that, how is that playing into these DNS attacks? But also on the flip side, how are we also helping protect with like DNSSEC and so forth when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so I think AI is obviously going to be huge across our industry as a whole. When you talk about the monitoring and logging piece, right? So it's one thing to have a centralized place to see those logs and to monitor those things. AI is taking that to another level now where we can actually get analysis on those logs, right? So if you think about DNS, everything that you use, your phone, your tablet, your watch, right? All of your glasses now, right? All of these things are using DNS. So the amount of data that's being generated from these logs is tremendous. Mm-hmm. So now having AI in the mix, now AI can actually filter out all the noise and let me know exactly what I need to be paying attention to. Or even predictively tell me like, hey, there may be an issue, or hey, you might be under attack, right? So now we can be more predictive and prevent some of these failures using AI.
Yeah. So when you look at these smaller organizations, you talked about companies, right? But I want to put a huge focus on the smaller organizations that don't have the manpower or the technologies really to, combat some of these threats that are out there. What is the minimum, implementation? How do they implement DNS to maintain their security posture without having to be, without these big corporations type of budgets and people, right? Man hours. How do they do that?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that kind of goes to one of the points I was making earlier, which is using a provider, right, that can provide those things out of the box for you.
Love it.
So that's one way that smaller organizations could get the same level of protection, right? You don't necessarily have the manpower or the time, right? Because usually in those smaller organizations, you wear more than one hat, right? So you may not have the time to review all of the data, so you can use a provider that can provide some of that for you. And, if they are going to take on some of those tasks themselves, they may augment some of that, right? So maybe I have a provider reviewing my logs, and maybe they have an AI engine that can review my logs, but I still manage my own resolvers. So I'm still going to harden my resolvers and then implement DNSSEC, but maybe I don't have the manpower to do the logging and analytics and some of the threat intel that comes along with DNS. So kind of see a hybrid approach there.
No, it's good. I think, have some really, really smart people, but also put in the processes in between, right? I think that's going to be the key to keep yourself safe and follow the basics. I think for me, that's the way I kind of look at things is when you follow the basics, I think you get exactly what you need to get out of it in the security piece of it. So I think people go off the rails when they try to, go so far outside the box instead of removing and they remove the basics. So fun stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of noise out there, and there's always a new flavor of something that you can go buy and implement or do. But those core principles still going to remain regardless of what implementation you go with. So
I love it. No, I love it. So when you think about security leadership and the culture, right, that this all breeds, because I think that's a huge part of it as well. And so when you're building that security culture, around those foundational systems, what are some of the things that often get overlooked?
This is a great question, right? Because I think the core problem is the foundational things, right? DNS, identity, patching, backups, right? Those things aren't flashy, right? They don't particularly drive revenue, or they're not typically visible until they fail, right?
Right.
So nobody really cares about DNS until it doesn't work, right? Which is kind of one of those things we take for granted. And oftentimes, right, leadership will fund the new flashy tools, and the boring stuff is just something that's supposed to be reliable. So those things, right, are things that should be enablers in the security culture, right? We should find a way to frame those and then tie those directly to the risk of the business. So I think if we put that foundation there first, and then we also have to understand the impact of it, because you can't protect what you don't understand, right? So it's a mentality shift when we think about some of those things that aren't, the next cool technology like AI, right?
Right.
But they're foundational to make all of those things work.
No, 1,000%. So when you speak to security executives or just executives in general, like, what is the biggest challenge for getting their buy-in, right, on these foundational systems? I think that's a huge thing. We have to get that buy-in, but how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So in any business, right, especially publicly traded, but even some of the smaller organizations that are publicly traded, right, you have to be able to tie that back to revenue, right? So if I'm talking to an executive, one of the things I try to explain is, if DNS goes down, revenue stops or business stops, right?
Right.
Or, if our identity strategy is weak, then we're compromised, right?
Yeah.
So there's like 4 categories that when I talk to execs that I try to tie things to, and revenue is one of those things, right? Executives want to reduce their risk, speed to market. They want to be protected, and they want to understand the impact of what happens if they're not, or if there's an issue, right? So if I can tie things to those 4 categories, typically they're listening, right? So if you can tie it to, what happens if this doesn't work, or what happens if this fails, what happens to the business, right? They don't really care about the technology, but they're going to care about the impact to their business. So I try to always tie it to the impact to the business.
100%. Money. Let the world go around, right? So, I love it. And so when you think about, breaking into cybersecurity, what are some of the things that you would tell, whether it's your young self or just young folks wanting to get in the field? What would you tell them?
Man, that's a great question. One thing I would say is you don't need 10 certifications, right? A lot of times people run out there, they get all these certifications. In my previous role, I was a manager, and I had some people reporting to me. And when we were hiring, we would look at these resumes, and you would see all of these certifications and qualifications, right? Which, don't get me wrong, they do help, right? Because it does give you some foundational knowledge. But it doesn't necessarily translate to, hey, I got all these certs, so I'm going to get hired. Or even a CS, like computer science degree. I think the main things you need is you need to be curious, right? So curiosity is one of the best fuels for learning, right? Fundamentals. So learn the fundamentals of technology. And then be persistent, man. Just be persistent in your journey. One of my first mentors, he kind of sold me on the term sponge mode, right? Yeah. I had a way that I wanted to go in my career, and opportunities just wasn't there to present itself. So he said, hey, you can come learn these things while you're waiting or want an opportunity to do this, but don't pigeonhole yourself or limit yourself, right?
Right.
So I kind of took hold to that. And even to this day, right, I just learned as much as I can. And that's the curiosity in me, right? I want to know those things, right? So that's a long-winded way to say, right, don't kill yourself with certs. Don't feel like you have to have a degree, but I think the main things you need is curiosity, learn the fundamentals, and then just be persistent.
I love it. And so I'd add one more thing in there, soft skills, right? Like, I love what you have to have soft skills. If you can't convey the message and be able to interact with folks in the right way, the message regardless is going to fall short. And so having that soft skill to kind of keep, the conversation going, keep it top of mind, and being able to, what does it say? Make somebody eat something that that they don't necessarily want. I think that's another key as well. And so, no, Garland, I mean, when you look at cybersecurity as a whole, you got DNS and all of these. I would love, like, what are your final thoughts? What are you seeing for the future? What's next in our world of security and DNS?
Yeah, so cybersecurity is going to be a landscape that's ever evolving, right? Like now we've got a whole new paradigm with AI now, where we're calling it, or I'm seeing it being referred to as layer 8, right? So the layer 1 through 7 technologies aren't as effective when it comes to AI because you got to understand semantics, right? So it's always ever changing, but I think as a whole, right, cybersecurity isn't about like chasing the latest attack. It's more about protecting systems that, everything that relies on those systems, protecting those, right? And DNS is one of those things, right? DNS is going to be core to anything that is happening on the internet or using TCP/IP, right? Yeah. At some point, you're going to need DNS, especially when we talk about delivering things to end users. So understanding the importance of it, but also understanding that as these technologies evolve, right, like DNSSEC and using AI, logging, threat intel, right, the attacks are also evolving. Mm-hmm. And now, we talk about AI. There's a lot of good uses for AI, but there's actually people out here doing a lot of bad things with AI, right? So that landscape is going to forever evolve. And that's where the persistence comes, right? Like I mentioned that earlier, persistence in that ever evolving landscape. You have to be curious about it and stay persistent to the changes.
No, I totally agree. And Garland, I truly appreciate you jumping on, man. I mean, we've been trying to do this for a while, and so I'm happy we had the opportunity to do this. And I look forward to the next time you jump on and we have even more to talk about. So, no, thanks for joining us on the show, and we'll talk super soon, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here. Have a good one.
You as well.
That wraps up my conversation with Garland Moore, Solutions Architect at F5. We covered DNS security threats, the role of AI in both attacking and defending these critical systems, and practical strategies for organizations of all sizes to protect their infrastructure. Garland's key message resonated with me. Cybersecurity isn't about chasing the latest attack. It's about protecting the foundational systems that everything else relies on. DNS, identity, patching, backups, these aren't flashy, but they're essential. And as Garland reminded us, nobody cares about DNS until it doesn't work. For anyone breaking into cybersecurity, take Garland's advice. Stay curious, learn the fundamentals, and be persistent. You don't need 10 certifications to get started. You need the drive to keep learning in this ever-evolving landscape. If you want to connect with Garland or learn more about his work in DNS security and modern application architectures, reach out to him on LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in to Secured with Dr. KJ, where we are securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.